Hi, my name is Bracken Hayden, and I will be doing a presentation along with my peers CJ Benson, Justin Harris, and Savannah Guilford over JCPenney's versus COVID-19 and bankruptcy. JCPenney's first opened in April of 1902 in Gilmer, Wyoming. Its first name was the Golden Rule as a standard for customer service. They stated that you should treat others as you would like to be treated. 11 years later, in 1913, the store officially became named JCPenney's after its founder, James Cash Penney. JCPenney's was a very successful and staple department store for many households, selling anything from fashion to homeware. It was doing very well and was a success. CompanyHistory.com states in 1971, JCPenney's reached its peak revenue at $5 billion, which as 2014 was equivalent to $29.1 billion. And they had around 2,000 stores. It was a place where people of any age could go and find a large variety of products and a large variety of different brands. However, near the beginning of the 2000s, JCPenney's sales began to drastically decline. They had started implementing new marketing strategies that were unsuccessful, and they began losing their strong relationships with their valued customers. From there, they began discontinuing unsuccessful lines such as hardware, laying off employees, and closing many of their stores. CompanyHistory.com also states that as of 2002, they had laid off nearly 13% of their home office in Dallas, Texas, and more than 350 employees in their headquarters. Furthermore, within 2 more years, they had announced the closing of another 33 stores and had laid off an additional 2,000 employees. Although it wasn't looking too good, numbers and data showed that there was still hope for the company. However, that was until COVID-19 began a nationwide pandemic. In previous decades, JCPenney's had already been facing debt and many challenges to keep their company alive. But after 2020, they began drowning even further. The revenues began declining even more drastically as people were forced to stay home, unable to shop in their stores, and they also faced supply shortage issues. Their CEO even stated, until the pandemic struck, we had made significant progress rebuilding our plan for renewal strategy, and our efforts had already begun to pay off. However, by May of 2020, JCPenney's was officially forced into Chapter 11 bankruptcy. CNN Business stated that, in general, clothing stores lost 89% of profit due to COVID, being one of the most negatively impacted industries in 2020. Therefore, it was really no surprise that JCPenney's would struggle as bad as they did and would even eventually have to file for bankruptcy.
Detailed recommendations. There are many ways to prevent bankruptcy, such as establishing a budget in all aspects of business within the company. Secondly, establishing and maintaining a good credit score through providers and suppliers, along with paying bills on time and having set reports to record all these massive payments through 800 plus stores. In JCPenney's case, helps to stay on top of debts. The biggest mistake that JCPenney made was not having a big enough emergency fund for emergency situations such as COVID-19, which in the end causes the company to go into bankruptcy. Some ways that JCPenney could recover from bankruptcy would be to have a flash sale where they cut their prices in half to promote their product to the public, hopefully encouraging large numbers of consumers to buy their products so they could pay off these massive debts, which in turn hopefully builds back up enough credit for the company to survive through the rough patch. A final and last resort option for any company in this position would be to find a private investor to potentially fund the company till it recovers. This doesn't happen often dealing with the amount of money we're talking about in JCPenney's case. Most investors aren't willing to risk such large amounts of money on a second chance. The other option is investors buy the company outright, start fresh with new ownership, new executives, and new business plan, which tends to be the case in most situations such as JCPenney. Here are my visuals. You can see on the left there's an abandoned JCPenney building that had to close its doors due to COVID-19. And on the right, same situation. A JCPenney had to close temporarily due to COVID-19 and lack of employment. My sources were Forbes, where I found a lot of good information on the debt amount, along with National Debt Relief, where I found most of my information on how to recover and stay out of bankruptcy, along with uscourts.gov, also where I found a lot of good information on how to prevent bankruptcy and how to get out of it if you are in it.
This slide is a timeline of significant events leading up to JCPenney filing Chapter 11 bankruptcy in May of 2020. In 2011, Ron Johnson was a recently hired CEO with promises to restructure with new store policies and store reconfiguration. At this time, Ron Johnson was known for his success in the department store industry. Although, in 2012, sales declined 24%. Lawsuits with Martha Stewart/Macy's, the stock becoming very volatile, and another slew of problems, Johnson was removed as CEO in April of 2013. In 2018, Jill Solito was named new CEO. Jill Solito was a veteran retail leader, most recently known for being in charge of Joann Fabric and Craft stores. Although in 2020, they had problems with the stock market and a reported $3.7 billion in debt, their stock prices fell below $1. And then on April 1st, COVID-19 forced stores to close, as well as many employees were laid off. And then May 15th, 2020 is when JCPenney filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy. What is Chapter 11 bankruptcy? Per the United States courts, Chapter 11 bankruptcy code, commonly known as the reorganization bankruptcy, end quote, usually the debtor remains in possession, has the powers and duties of a trustee, may continue to operate his business, and may, with court approval, borrow new money. Filing bankruptcy basically protects the debtor from immediate relief and actions in protection of their assets while the case is being decided. So due to the impacts from COVID-19, JCPenney filed bankruptcy in May while still $4.2 billion in debt. How did JCPenney bounce back? Well, Simon Property Group and Brookfield Property Group arranged to buy JCPenney out of bankruptcy, as well as hiring a new CEO in Mark Rosen, who focused on restructuring, has evolved the company image and proven successful in the rise of profit. Profit being regaining market share, higher stock prices, increasing not only foot traffic in brick and mortar stores, but an increase in online traffic as well. He also imposed strategies to emphasize merchandise, such as junior wear, children, and accessories, since these areas have historically proven to be profitable categories.
To close, we would like to quickly recap the history of JCPenney, the crisis that the company has dealt with, and our team's way of addressing it. So as we mentioned before, JCPenney as a company was successful early in its career. It quickly created a household name for itself in the retail market when it first opened back in 1902. The company clearly showed its potential for success by opening its 500th store in just 22 years. This information was gathered from the article titled JCPenney, written by Alice Reese. However, in recent years, previous debt was an accumulated issue for the company, which was created by the company's attempt to make radical changes. Then, once the COVID-19 pandemic struck, it gave JCPenney its final blow, knocking the company into bankruptcy. Unfortunately, JCPenney was just one of the 83 big-name companies that fell victim to COVID-19-induced Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing within the first 3 quarters of 2020. This information was gathered from the article titled, "Here Are All of the Companies That Went Bankrupt During the COVID-19 Pandemic," written by Jael Goldfein. With that being said, our team has created suggestions and recommendations that we feel will help the company return to its feet once again as it navigates through this crisis. The final recommendations we made can be sorted into 2 types. recovery recommendations, and preventative recommendations. The recovery ones are recommendations that will help JCPenney gain the financing to get out of this original debt. These include finding a private investor to either fund or buy out the company and creating special in-store sales such as flash sales. And then our preventative ones are recommendations that will stop JCPenney from entering a crisis like this again once they recover from bankruptcy. These are recommendations such as creating budgets, business plans, emergency funds, and maintaining good credit scores. Essentially, they're all things to avoid future debt from accumulating. For the first step, finding a private investor to either fund JCPenney or buy the company out will be important in order to get the company back on its feet. Considering the amount of debt that the company is in, mass amounts of money provided from investors will give the company its jumpstart. This recommendation will be the most difficult, but also the most necessary. Once this is done, we will implement the flash sales, which will allow the company to boost its in-store profits again and hopefully carry the company back to success. Lastly, we will implement our preventative recommendations such as budgets, business plans, and other ways of avoiding debt so the company won't run into this problem again in the future. Looking forward, our team believes that even in these times of hard struggle, JCPenney will be able to make it through bankruptcy and continue forward as one of the biggest department store chains if these changes are adopted. COVID-19 has forever changed the ways of businesses, but with new investors, capital, and strategies, JCPenney will be able to stay in business and keep up with a new market.